Well, it's been a big week in US politics with the Republican caucus kicking off in Iowa. Next week, all eyes will be on New Hampshire. They're next in line. And of course, everyone is talking about the party's leading candidate, the former US President Donald Trump. I spoke to Joe Siracusa, Dean of Global Futures at Curtin University, and asked him how the lead up to the US election impacts global markets.
Well, a great deal, as a matter of fact. I used to work on Wall Street, and I've watched these things for about 50, 55 years. And the global markets are very keen on this. For example, in Davos right now, we have the world's economic and political leaders there. And they're not talking about climate change or stuff like that. They're talking about Donald Trump. And look, Hortensia, these guys never lost any money betting on the right horse. I mean, they can see that Donald Trump is a business style president. He favors businesses over unions and the like, and he's good for the economy around the world. Now he's not exactly anathema. Joe Biden, of course, is a union guy. He wants to let everyone off their bad debts and all the rest of it, but he's sort of lumbered with inflation, and a lot of Americans have the impression that they're worse off with Joe Biden than Donald Trump couple of years ago. And you know what, Hortensia? They're right. They are worse off with Joe Biden. 90% of Americans are like Australians. They go from paycheck to paycheck. So when the groceries go up 22, 30 bucks a week, there's something less they're going to be buying this week than they did the week before. So, they take it very seriously. But anyway, Donald Trump is a business president. The Dow Jones will rise under him, as a matter of fact. And aside from alliances and some of the niceties of diplomacy, the business world does not look askance at the possible presidency of Donald Trump or the inevitability of Donald Trump. They'll have worked this out well before the election.
Joe, how much of an impact does the current state of the US economy influence voters?
Oh, a great deal. I mean, they ask voters, what's on your mind? It's always the economy is number one. Immigration might be number two or three, or immigration policies at the border. And then 5 or 6 is always foreign policy. I mean, the world has got a lot of foreign policy events right now that affect supply chain, inflation, war in Ukraine, the food basket there, and the rest of it. But that's low down on the American list. They want to know if they can live under under the president. And so they asked the economic question. Now, some people would say some people don't vote with their wallets. They're above all that. No, actually, they're not above all that. As a matter of fact, people can't eat. They're not worried about who they're going to vote for. So they want to know who they're better off. And Ronald Reagan asked that at the time when he was running against Jimmy Carter, who are you better off with, Republicans or the Democrats? Well, I'll tell you what. You're not old enough to remember this, but when Jimmy Carter was president, your insurance, your rates on your credit card were up to about 27%, and people went broke paying their bills. So Ronald Reagan knew what he was doing, as a matter of fact. But look, economy plays a great deal. And, the other thing, too, is that Donald Trump has come roaring back from nowhere. About 15 months ago, it looks like he was going to jail. Well, today he looks like he might be going to jail anyway, but it doesn't make any difference. He can run the presidency from prison as far as the Constitution is concerned, and he's come roaring back. And I think the really interesting news this time around, and I've been watching politics very closely for 5 decades, is that the polls seem to be spot on. The Des Moines Register poll just before the election, before the caucus vote in Iowa, said that Trump was on 51 or 52%. Well, he was on 51, 52%. And they predicted that it would be a toss-up between Haley and DeSantis. And, they were absolutely right. So, in 2016, all the polls were either wrong or they were crooked or they were bent. I don't know who organized those things. But, American politics is very fluid. And, Hortensia, politics in America is a contact sport. It's very rough. And, when I was a kid growing up in Chicago, which is run by the crooked Democratic machine led by Mayor Daley, when I say crooked, he did a lot of things that wouldn't pass ethics or law today, as a matter of fact. And you know, in 1960, my grandfather voted about 3 times for John Kennedy for the presidency. So Illinois was probably just enough to get Kennedy over the line. I mean, you know, politics is bought and sold. And you know what people don't realize in Australia is when a president or a mayor or a governor gets in, he's got a patronage. He can offer thousands of jobs to people, and
So,
he can actually make people stay. You know, vote his way because they might not have the jobs on Monday morning.
so Joe, what you're saying is this time around, the polls are spot on. So by the time Super Tuesday comes around, do you believe the US will have their presidential candidate locked in?
Yeah, I think it is. You know, Trump won Iowa handily. I believe he's going to win New Hampshire, and you know he just doesn't have a lot of competition there. The lovely governor from South Carolina and the governor from Florida, they just don't have enough oomph in their engines to beat him to the polls. And right now he's leading, I think, by about 53, 54%, or he's 16, 20% above the next contenders. So I think by Super Tuesday, that is March, when we have all these other delegates coming up for the vote, I think former President Trump will have locked in the election and given the Democrats something very difficult to think about. And that is, how are they going to win this election with Joe Biden in the physical and mental shape he's in? Now, I'm not going to say he's missing his marbles, but it's quite clear that time has taken its toll on him, and we all age differently. And he looks very tired. And these wars in Gaza and the war in Ukraine and all the rest of his foreign policy disasters have weighed very heavily on him. And I don't think he's holding up very well. And a lot of people are counting on him. And I'm sure there are a lot of people in the Democratic Party, Tenzia, who are looking for ways to get rid of him before they meet. Before they meet in Chicago in July, they may even try to roll him.
Yes, it'll be very interesting to see how this all turns out. Joseph Siracusa, thank you for your time.
My pleasure.